how how are you keeping 360 expeditions moving forwards in a time when you can't go and do traditionally what paid your wages?
Yeah, it's a kind of strange situation, and totally. I mean, I'd be telling the fibs if I was saying that we're not in a kind of difficult situation. Before COVID happened, though, we had a good buffer. We were doing quite well. I mean, we have one of the highest return rates in the industry, and we kind of like we're popular with our trackers. We delivered a great product, and so we had a comfortable buffer. And certainly that's being eaten away at daily. It's a difficult situation, but for us at the moment, the saving grace is that practically none of our clients have cancelled, or fully wanted their money back. Basically everybody's postponed, and that's really good. That's a great sign. It's just like so the money's retained in the company and for the future trips. And like I was saying before, that's a great thing for giving hope for the local teams that work for us around the world, that we work with around the world. And so, we're just hanging in there. And, now we're focusing on European trips.
We Get Outdoors Tribe, we're blessed again to have a return visitor, a return guest to the We Get Outdoors podcast. We're blessed to have Rolfe Oostra, mountain guide extraordinaire, owner of 360 Expeditions, a guy who I've got huge amounts of respect and time for, who leads expeditions and trips around the world in what I believe to be the right way. There isn't a continent this guy really hasn't gone and excelled at. And let's just jump into it. Rolfe, welcome to the We Get Outdoors podcast again.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. It's the last time we had a great conversation, and we kind of came to grips with some pretty important topics, and I'm looking forward to doing it all again.
Fantastic. So, how's the world? I mean, we're in the middle of COVID bonkers, and for somebody like yourself who takes people to interesting and cool places around the world to do interesting and cool things, like what's going on for 360 and for Rolfe?
Well, it's like you say, we're in the middle of this crazy scenario. Where I'm based in Europe. The company's a UK registered company, but the headquarters is in the Pyrenees in France. And Europe is slowly starting to crawl out of the COVID blues. We've a lot of vaccinations are happening. Most people are now double vaccinated, and it's starting to look a little bit more positive than we were this time last year. In France now there was 700 cases yesterday, which is quite small in considering what it has been. But for our main thing is that we're running international expeditions to places where the situation is totally different. And at the moment, I'm supposed to be on an expedition to Pakistan to climb mountains in the Karakoram range. But we've decided to not go, to postpone until next year, basically because we don't want to we want to protect our clients. Even though we had pretty good preparations, all the clients are doubly vaccinated, and we had lots of COVID tests on board and ready to take over there to continuously test our teams. We've done all the thorough preparation, but we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at the local populations. We're looking at the Baltic people. That's the local population there. And the pandemic is just started to get out of control there. And we didn't want to impose and use up resources that these communities could need desperately at this time. And so and contribute to the spread of the virus. So we thought, okay, we're going to postpone. And that's the case in practically every country we were operating. Particularly Nepal, India coming up, and also East Africa. So everything's on hold. But the positive thing for us is that a vast majority of our clients have decided to postpone rather than cancel. So the dream is still there. The dream is just on hold. And, so that's positive for us that people are still super encouraged, by the fact that we'll be, doing this, making the mission possible. And that's also a hugely positive thing for our local teams. Say, for example, our Sherpa teams in Nepal, they know that by our clients postponing, that we'll be back. And that gives them a huge confidence and encouragement for the future, for themselves.
Now, a bit like myself, you're not reliant on CNN or the BBC to find out what's happening in these countries. You've got, as you say, local teams of Sherpas in Nepal and Pakistan and wherever else. What are they saying to you about what's really happening on the ground in East Africa, Nepal, Pakistan at the moment?
Oh, it's a crisis. This is now the second time running that say, particularly looking at Nepal, is getting to a point where people are starving to death. And it's just that. It's just the continuation. And they have very minimal resources. It's quite a corrupt country, and it's basically for the like porters. It's getting more and more desperate, and they're coming basically back to the villages, and going back to the lifestyles they had, with post-COVID, which is basically hand-to-mouth existence. And, scraping any food together they can. And it's a kind of situation like that. There's literally no support. And, we're continually sending money and sending help and medicine and clothing, etc., to help them through the tide. But we were expecting it to be over. We had our fingers crossed, but it looks like we're in for another year of this. There's been some high-profile expeditions this year to Nepal, particularly to Everest. But as that unfolded this year, it turned out to be that very predictably that it was a total disaster, and that they couldn't contain virus. India, the Delta variant, started to spread really rapidly within India, and then it moved over to Nepal just as the expedition season started. And despite all the foreign expeditions coming prepared, they still couldn't contain the virus, and lots of Sherpas got sick. Lots of evacuations happened within base camp. Lots of expeditions had to cancelled altogether on the spot, and a lot of people didn't summit. So that's why we decided to postpone ourselves. But for the people on the ground, it's getting more and more desperate as time rolls. And I think in Nepal, 3% of the population have actually been vaccinated, and so it's a long time coming before the whole population is properly being vaccinated and that virus has been off.
I really respect, by the way, what you said before we hit record, which was around how you're not just thinking about can you keep the client safe, but that bit of actually we don't want to take necessary resources away from the locals who probably need those resources more than we do.
Yeah, that's right. And it's at the moment, it's we're like looking at our expedition to Gasherbrum 2, which is supposed to be happening now. It's an expedition that involves a lot of people. So at the moment, the area where we're planning to run this expedition is the Karakoram, and the main city there, the biggest town there, is a town called Skardu, and Skardu is pretty COVID free, but at the same time, we're getting people coming from all different countries around the world. We're getting people coming from the Sherpas are coming from Nepal, which at the moment is a catastrophe as far as the virus is concerned. And so also we're going to have trucks move from Islamabad over the top of the mountains to get to Skardu. We're going to have lots of men coming from different villages to from all different parts of the Karakoram themselves to join us in Skadu to come on an expedition. So all these people are coming from all different directions, and some coming from countries where the virus hasn't been contained properly. The vaccination programs are way behind. Choosing a lot of people to a number of people to the top of a mountain, and at the same time, this expedition is being run in a place where there is very, very minimal resources, and it's very, very difficult to contain the spread. And we don't want to be the reason that virus came to that area in the first place. And secondly, like we mentioned before, if it comes to something like an evacuation from one of our people, or one of our people needs to get out, then we'll be using helicopters, and those helicopters are probably sorely needed at this time for the local population. And it's not just that; it's also manpower. It's all that kind of stuff that we're taking for our expedition, and that can be really useful for the local population in a time of a pandemic. And so that's why we decided, okay, all these factors considered, it's the best thing to do is to postpone until next year.
How do you manage? In the United States last year, at the end of the summer, when the pandemic started to quieten down and the vaccination program started to kick in, the US national parks and state parks were overwhelmed with huge numbers of people turning up, in their thousands, to go and get in the outdoors. Do you think there's a slight risk of that happening in places like around Kilimanjaro, in and around Nepal, Luxor? I'm just thinking Everest Base Camp, so on and so forth, where suddenly those countries can end up overwhelmed with people having not been there for a couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's just like I'm all our client base is from the UK, and so the UK has had super extensive lockdowns, and like you said, as soon as the doors opened, everybody wanted to get out and about, and basically they started heading for the national parks, and literally when I was seeing news footage of places like the Lake District and the Peak District, and it was like Pitt Street, it was like cars everywhere, people everywhere, and the whole place is like the highest peak in Wales, for example, that was Snowdon, was totally overdone with people. People were lining up for 2 or 3 hours to get to the summit, standing in a queue. So it's, I mean, of course, people have been locked up and they want to see stuff. And, first of all, it's going to be at a local level, and then it's going to be at an international level once the famous, treks like Everest Base Camp start to open up again. And that's going to be quite a problem. And particularly in places where the virus hasn't been contained. And for the West is going to be, looking at places like Nepal to open up, because traditionally there's been fantastic trekking opportunities there. It's an amazing country. But I think it's important for Nepal to sort the problem out before they allow visitors back. And like we just talked about just now with Everest Base Camp, the potential of disaster really displayed itself in the fact that Nepal opened the gates for the Everest expeditions to happen, and basically it went terribly wrong, and it was COVID city. And so, it's too early for that to happen. But you're right. It once the gate opens up, then you won't be able to stop people, and all the famous places like you just mentioned will be inundated with people again, and maybe that will perpetuate the problem even further.
Yeah, I've spent quite a lot of time in Nepal, and I know that Nepal is to be exceptionally resourceful, but also not afraid to push the prices up of stuff if they if they suddenly play the supply and demand game. So maybe it might partly work in their favour if they can manage it. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Um,
Yeah, and it was interesting with Kilimanjaro because a couple of years ago, Kilimanjaro had this problem with too many people coming, and they thought to resolve that problem was to double the entrance fee. So all of a sudden, Kilimanjaro became twice as expensive to go to, but that didn't make a difference. In fact, the next year after they put the prices up, they were double the numbers. So you know, it's um, it's this kind of thing that gains the public imagination that you know, wow, here's an iconic destination like Kilimanjaro. You know, it's the highest mountain in Africa, and people want part of that. People want that experience. So and who you know is it to deny them? But at this point, it's much more important to consider the local populations and to and their health. And you know, once you've been to a place to Nepal, you kind of develop a connection to that, and it's to fundraise and to support these people during the time. Having been there, it's to say, you know what, this is a country I love and really respect, and all these people I know, and they're in a different situation to what we are in Europe. So we can contribute to them and we can help them, and so with international support, we can get these countries through because they can't do it themselves. It's quite an impossibility for the Nepalese to get their act straight, and you know, it's a very corrupt country, and it's just it's one of those kind of places where they're really at the back foot to kind of like resolve those problems, and it needs a lot of international help. But that international help is more forthcoming from people who've actually have formed a connection with the country and who you know love, you know, places like Kilimanjaro and that sort of stuff, and say, you know, we know the local people, we know the mountains, and we know the area, and we're willing to help. We're willing to contribute to getting that industry back and to having you know, the doors open again.
Yeah. So on a more close to home basis, you know, with what I do at We Get Outdoors, I speak to guides and coaches and people who own guiding and coaching businesses on a pretty much a daily basis. And you know, so many of them have had to now close their doors because the business just can't sustain itself. How are you keeping 360 expeditions moving forwards in a time when you can't go and do traditionally what paid your wages?
Yeah, it's a kind of strange situation, and totally. I mean, I'd be telling the fibs if I was saying that we're not in a kind of difficult situation. Before COVID happened, though, we had a good buffer. We were doing quite well. I mean, we have one of the highest return rates in the industry, and we kind of like we're popular with our trackers. We delivered a great product, and so we had a comfortable buffer. And certainly that's being eaten away at daily. It's a difficult situation, but for us at the moment, the saving grace is that practically none of our clients have cancelled or fully wanted their money back. Basically, everybody's postponed, and that's really good. That's a great sign. It's just like so the money's retained in the company, and for the future trips. And like I was saying before, that's a great thing for giving hope for the local teams that work for us around the world, that we work with around the world. And so, you know, we're just hanging in there. And, you know, now we're focusing on European trips. Europe is slowly starting to open up. There's a lot of travel allowed now within Europe itself. And so we are focusing on particularly the Pyrenees, where our headquarters is, and for like say mid-August to October, it looks like we're going to be pretty busy, and so we're focusing on local tourism and local adventure rather than international stuff at the moment, and until the time is when all these countries have got their act together in regards to vaccinations, and then we can start thinking about internationally. But we're surviving at the moment by focusing on the local local adventure we have here. And that's actually super plentiful. We've got great canyoning, great rafting, amazing climbing, great trekking. So yeah, it's still the spirit of adventure hasn't been lost. People are still wanting to get out and about, and we're focusing on providing that adventure in our local mountains, and that's basically how we're surviving.
Yeah, it strikes me that now is a really good time for people to go and up their technical skill ability at whatever it is they choose to do in the outdoors, so that when they do get that maybe once in a lifetime or once in a decade opportunity to go and climb a big peak in the Himalaya or the Andes or wherever it may well be, that they actually can do it with maybe more enjoyment and more skill because they've put the time in now and use this time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the nail on the head. There's no time, like the present for preparation and for getting ready. And all, say, for example, all expedition skill courses, which is like a 7-8 day development courses to get people ready for expeditions, are ramped packed. We've had to provide additional programs. Normally we run 4, but now we're like running 7 or 8. And so it's people are understanding that now is a great time to get prepared and up their technical knowledge and learn how to be not just a climber, but also how to be a good team member and how to work as a team. And all that kind of stuff is now a great opportunity to develop that rather than as learning it on an expedition. Now we're learning it in our local mountains and covering all those skills that are needed for, like you say, for when the doors open and we can get out and about again. And you'd be much better prepared having done courses like that and having gained that knowledge and understanding the skills needed for tackling the big peaks rather than learning them on the job. Now you come armed with a toolbox full of tricks before you even get to the destination. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, because it would strike me that if people want to go and summit a big peak, and I've seen and witnessed and know quite a few people who've had a go at Everest, that the likelihood of you getting to the summit is that there's a direct link to how physically and mentally fit you are and how technically able you are, in terms of the higher those 3 things are, the higher the likelihood of you getting to the top. So if you want to get to the top next year, now's the time to get on top of your physical game and your technical game to stack the odds more highly in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely. That's typical case every year. Have people who practically have no idea. But Everest is quite a strange situation. What happens on Everest is quite unique in comparison to other less known mountains in more remote places. Because it's the highest mountain in the world, it has a massive kudos to stand on top, and so it attracts a lot of people who are not interested in the process of climbing or the actual doing it. They rather want to have done it. They want to have been there and done it. And the whole expedition experience, the whole climbing experience, the whole being away for a couple of months to tackle a big mountain, it's definitely has a secondary importance to actually making that big tick. And so because it's the highest mountain and it has all that kudos, it attracts a whole bunch of people that haven't seen mountains before. Is quite a crazy thing. It's like, particularly for countries like India, where Indian climbers, they come and they have absolutely zero experience because they haven't got the means or the resources to do it, so they save up and finally enough money to go on an Everest expedition, and then they come totally unprepared. And also need to look at who the companies are who provide these super cheap packages for climbing a mountain like Mount Everest, and they basically don't. The reason they get are so popular is because they don't ask any questions about your previous experience, and so we have all these problems developing. What most Western companies like ourselves and say Jagger Globe and Venture Consultants and Madison and all the well-known and respected companies, you won't get on an Everest expedition unless you've climbed another 8,000 beforehand, and we need to see a pretty extensive climbing CV before you get a place on the expedition. But then particularly a lot of local companies, the Nepali companies, they don't ask any questions, and bingo, you find yourself on the mountain without having been asked too many questions about your experience and what you've done before, or having kind of like met all the to my mind necessary criteria, and there you are, like you find yourself at 7,500 meters in a shitstorm, and what do you do next? You kind of have no physical skills or technical skills to get off the mountains, or should something happen to the guide or the Sherpa, then you're in a pretty lonely place if you don't know what to do. And that's what we prepare our clients for, is that the worst case scenario, if anything does happen to your guide or your Sherpa, that you have enough tools in the toolbox to get yourself off that mountain. And unfortunately, those skills are not developed by many companies. And then you get the scenarios where, you have a lot of people stranded on the mountain in dire situation that could be totally resolved beforehand if they learn the skills and being prepared properly for being there.
So tell me, I've at one point in time in my life I wanted to go and summit Everest, Rolf, but I have to be honest that the older I get, the appeal of Everest gets less and less, and the reason why is because it's base camp is like a mini city for a few months of the year, and there's often massive queues to get to the summit, and so on and so forth. So if not Everest, what's the other one to go for that's maybe less obvious but equally as rewarding?
I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a big tick, if you're looking for like something that that people recognize, and ultimately is whether you like being in the mountains or whether you like being seen in the mountains. If you're doing it for other people, or if you're like doing it for likes on Facebook or to improve your social status, then the remote mountains that are out there, and to my mind, are much more spectacular objectives that don't make a lot of sense. If I was going to say, let's go climb Gasherbrum 2, which is one of the most spectacular mountains in the world. It's 8,000 plus. It's I think the 11th highest peak in the planet, and it's super remote and absolutely an adventure with a capital A. That just nobody knows what Gasherbrum 2 is. So nobody knows even where to find it on the map. So for folk who are interested in that kind of stuff, then that would be the next challenge, But if you're just interested in the big name stuff to kind of boost the ego and to kind of like to prove your social status and have bragging rights or whatever, then that kind of stuff's not interesting to people. But for the folk who truly like adventure, who like exploration, who like seeing communities that are remote, interacting with totally different people that have no chance to meet before, to travel in some super exotic locations, and to really grasp the experience of climbing a mountain, then it's absolutely limitless as to what's out there. And and it suits all abilities. For example, in your own continent, Kilimanjaro draws the crowds, but next door you have a very pretty mountain called Mount Kenya, which is, to my mind, a much purer experience. You don't have the people, you don't have the crowds, you still have a lot of wildlife, and the landscape is fantastic, and the people you're working with and trekking with are great, awesome. And so it's all those elements combined that combine the experience. But if you're not interested in experience, if you're more interested in the tick in the box, then you'd be more interested in Kilimanjaro than Mount Kenya. But for my mind, the purity of adventure is more found on places where that are less well known.
Yeah. But by the way, I'm definitely after the capital A for adventure and the capital E for exploration. What people think of me on Instagram really doesn't mean very much to me. I'll share a little story, Rolf. I gave a presentation to the South African Explorationist Society a little while ago, and there was a couple of people in the audience who came and asked me what my book was called. And I said, "What book?" And they said, "Well, surely with all these things that you've done, you've got a book and you've got a video and you've got this." And I was like, no. I did it because it was about the adventure and the exploration, not to go and get likes on Facebook.
Yeah, that's it. And it's that. And, social media has now given everybody a chance to be a superstar. And so, you can, everybody is now in the spotlight. And so to have done an adventure like that, and particularly an adventure that everybody knows about, and then that it gets you likes, and it makes you feel popular, and it makes you feel good about yourself, and say, wow, I went to Africa and climbed Kilimanjaro, and all of a sudden 100,000 people like me. And it's like, okay, that's fine. But is that the reason for doing it? Or did you go there to taste something very unique and very different for yourself, and to have an experience? And my best experience has been away from social media and away from the internet, and just to be in the moment 100%, and to live the experience, and to enjoy the company of the people I'm doing the adventure with, and the company of the local people, and to be able to say wow, rather than to kind of like stop and take a photo and send it off on Instagram. Just to soak in the experience, and to kind of like store it in the memory box, and kind of 60 years time, you'll be able to say, wow, that was a fantastic trip, rather than to say, oh, well, I took some great photos for Instagram. So it's a different approach to why we travel and why we go on adventures.
I think so. I part of me feels like that there's a group of the world who's lost that sort of Chris Bonington, Ranulph Fiennes type curiosity and edge to them, where they're not going to stand on the peak. They're going to go and see if it's possible to stand on the peak. Do you know what I mean? They're going to go and give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that sense of wonder, and that's the fact that it's not. I think the problem is today that everything, you have this instant gratification nonstop, and so the thing with this exploration, and the thing with mountains and or polar regions or desert or jungle missions, it's about can we actually do this? Can it actually happen? And can we actually do this? And that's a question that's really important in adventure, is like, to not to take something for granted, and not to say, okay, like, I'm going to fly there, I'm going to do this, and then go home. It's basically, well, can we actually do this? Can we actually pull this off? And that whole process of sharing all your talents and combining all your resources and talents and experiences, and to have best crack at something. That's what adventure is about, and ultimately to know that, okay, we might walk away, and not having achieved what we've done, but we've had a great experience in the meantime.
Yeah. Rolf, one thing I particularly like about yourself and 360 Expeditions is that you do have the big ticket items on your sort of products that people can come and engage with, be it an Everest or a Kilimanjaro. But those are experiences where you can say, I'm one of 50,000 who've stood on the top of the peak. But what I particularly like is you have those packages and holidays and experiences, adventures, where people can come and say, actually, I'm one of only 20 people or 40 people in the world who stood on the top of this peak, and or been to the Amazon, or this part of the Amazon, or whatever it may well be. And I think that is really missing in the adventure travel business. It is that true exploration as opposed to being a sheep and following the herd.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, we have to have those itineraries up on our website. It's still for a lot of folk, for an average person, like living an average lifestyle, and having normal dreams. Something as exotic as climbing Kilimanjaro is still going to be the trip of a lifetime. It's still going to be the main thing, the fantastic experience, and have a lot of memories. But then once the ball starts to roll, and you get to do more and more of this kind of stuff, then the lure of the more exotic starts to kind of take hold, and that's where you start to go on these kind of trips where very few people have done, and it's not as popular. But it's still, these itineraries are popular because for a reason, and that's because they're magnificent. And so of course, once word gets out that it's an amazing experience, more people want to do it, and for a vast majority of people, it's going to be a once in a lifetime thing, and for a smaller amount of people, it's going to be it gets the ball rolling to more and more and more. And so for those people, that's my interest. That's what I'm interested in developing. I mean, I've done the 7 summits. I don't know how many times. I've been up Kilimanjaro 60 times, Everest 4 times. And it's okay. There's always going to be that attraction. But, personally, I'm much more interested in super remote stuff, and that's why we're running Gasherbrum 2 this year, and not just mountains. It's also like running remote rivers in the Amazon, or doing polar traverses. I'm off to Antarctica in November for doing some pretty unique stuff, and so yeah, it's different strokes for different folks, but I think for a small majority, they get that hooked on that adventure element, that hooked on the unknown element of adventure, and really kind of appreciate it for what it is, rather than it just being just another tick in the box.
Yeah. There's nothing better. I'm a self-confessed Google Earth addict, and I find nothing more satisfying than looking at places in Ethiopia or Rwanda, for instance, and going, "Jeepers, look at that topography. I wonder what could be possible there that somebody else has never done." And for me personally, that's the thing that gets me excited.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of blank on the map thing, isn't it? I mean, when we first came to Africa, it was the same kind of thing. We weren't looking at the Lonely Planet. We were looking at a map, and we were looking at, okay, where is there? There's no people, and then basically all those kind of super isolated spots. If there was a mountain there, or if there was a river, or there's some jungle to traverse, or whatever adventure to be had, then that's where we'd be over there. We'd be hitching our way over there. But yeah, it wasn't so much like, following the well-known beaten track. It was basically, okay, so what's empty? Where is there nobody? What are the blanks on the map? And yeah, that's hugely exciting, right? And like we were saying before, not knowing the outcome of what you're about to embark on is exciting. That's the element of exciting. It's adventure. That's the definition of adventure. Embarking on an adventure that doesn't necessarily have a predictable outcome.
Yeah, that's it. So listen, you've guided all around the world in different ways, shapes, and forms, and
That's right.
I wonder that I don't know quite what the question is. There's plenty of people who I meet who want to set up their version of a 360 expeditions, and they want to be a Rolfe. What's like? How do those people start?
It starts with the passion, and it starts with like I grew up in Australia, and we had a lot of wilderness at our exposure, and I got into climbing, and the ball started to roll from there. It's basically if you want to set up a guiding company or a company that take people out and about on adventures, you need to have the idea that it's not going to be a money spinner. You're not going to make any money from this. And most importantly, you have to have a passion for what you're doing, and the job satisfaction comes from taking people into these places and hearing them go wow, and seeing them reach the summits, and doing things that they'd never expected to be doing. And that's the kind of thing that the job satisfaction. But to get started, you have to have a passion in what you're doing. And I started climbing when I was 14, and haven't stopped. And it's you need to have a drive and a passion for continuously to see what's over the horizon, to continuously see what's around that next corner. And it's by no means very rich, but I'm very rich in my experiences, and I've done, like you say, I've guided every corner of the world, and not just mountaineering, but also rivers and poles and jungles, and deserts. So it's just that. It's the enthusiasm and the drive, and really love what you do, and really love what you your life to take those challenges on.
Yeah,
that's the number one criteria. Is you got to be smitten with the idea of climbing mountains.
It's interesting when I this is our second proper conversation. When I listen to you, is that if it almost feels like if somebody wants to view this as a job, probably it's the wrong thing for them to do, because if you have a job, somebody pays you to go on training courses and whatever else. Do you know what I mean? Like the business pays you to go and get this qualification or that qualification or this experience or that experience. And I'm going to guess that you've probably spent as much time spending money on going on expeditions as you've actually earned on working as a guide.
I think probably double. And it is that it is that it's quite a lot of companies set up now with people who like the idea of adventure and the idea of guiding, like I see more and more folks starting up. And so they've been guided to the top of Everest, for example, and then their main selling point is that I climbed Everest, for example, but it's climbing Everest as a client is very different to guiding Everest, and so but the public they're selling to, the people they're trying to convince to come on a trip with them, they just see I've climbed Everest, and to launch yourself on running an expedition company from their perspective is quite limited, because you haven't got the grounding of taking people out into the field and being the man in charge, being the person in charge, being at the sharp end of decision making, being at the sharp end of making the critical calls, having to deal with people's expectations, having to deal with people's disappointments. And that is something that you can only learn by being hands-on, and having done a vast amount of stuff before you get into the guide seat and start steering the boat. You need to have a vast amount of experience to be able to pull off an expedition to a remote location properly and safely. There's nothing like having a lot of previous experience and knowledge to do that properly and safely. And a lot of people jump in having been guided on an expedition and having really enjoyed the experience, but not as a guide, but as a client. And that's to me quite dangerous for taking people out and about when you haven't got the proper background.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've certified a lot of guides and leaders and coaches in the outdoors over the years, thousands actually. And the people who always seem to make the most success of themselves are the people that have done far more than the minimum requirement just to go and pass their qualification or certificate. Those are the people who seem to really make it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's nail on the head. It's just that and that shows in itself a lot of passion. It in itself shows a lot of like drive, and a lust for life and lust for like being out and about. And it's not just so much about, getting the right qualifications. If I'm sitting, the rare moments when I'm sitting behind my desk and I'm actually kind of like receiving CVs, from folk who want to work for 360, then it's the first thing I look for is like, what have they done? Not so much what qualifications do they have, more of like, this guy, I've got a CV in front of me and he wants to work for us and he says he's keen to work for us in the Andes. Then I don't look at his qualifications. I look at how many times has he been to the Andes? What has he done in the Andes? Can he speak Spanish? All these kind of life skills are much more important than having the Boy Scout badge, so it's that. It's from my perspective, having been out and about and having been there and done that is much more relevant to the adventure industry when you're in a guiding role or a leadership role than having all the ticks in the boxes.
Mm. In your journey to becoming to building 360 to what it is today, and being a guy who's guided on the biggest peaks on planet Earth as well as the lowest and coldest places as well, I suppose. What were some of the trips or expeditions where you learnt the most? And what were some of those big, profound learning moments that you had on your journey to where you are today?
Oh, that's a great question. It's almost the biggest learning curve you have personally is not something that you develop slowly. Like say, all my mountaineering, all my climbing has been developed slowly. From starting rock climbing as a kid to going to New Zealand to climb in the Kiwi Alps, and so it was very progressive and it was very like a proper apprenticeship. But where I've been tested the most and where I've been in environments where I'm totally not familiar with. And years ago, we ran the Congo River in Africa, and I've done a lot of unknown rivers and unexplored rivers in the Amazon. And that kind of stuff is like totally, I'm a total greedy, I'm totally like, wow, I'm right at the beginning. And so all these kind of unexpected things, like storms or like, being bitten by a piranha or being attacked by a hippopotamus, that sort of stuff is like, that's kind of stuff that's really, that's brand new learning curve. Totally throwing yourself into an environment where you're utterly unfamiliar with. That's where, you feel adventure has teeth in, where you think, wow, I'm certainly learning something new here, and every day is a school day.
That's it. And it's interesting that they say familiarity breeds contempt. So if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you'll eventually not treat it with the respect it's due. And until you get the day where once in a lifetime storm comes through and the world goes upside down. And the only way to prepare for that is to go to new places where you don't have any familiarity and where you do have to figure it out and problem solve as you go and make, I won't say life or death decisions, but let's just go with that, actually, life or death decisions in the moments that have critical importance to you. I think that's where the biggest learning for me has always come.
Yeah, and it's exactly right, and that's where you learn that to stick with your decision. Like in these kind of things, you can't like when it's like you say, a life or death scenario where it's becoming important not to flap, not to kind of like panic, not to have too many things running through your head and say, okay, oh, what should I do? What should I do? It's basically, okay, make a decision and ride with that decision, be it wrong or right. It's just like, you need to have all your energy focused on one path rather than clutching at straws and considering too many variables. And that takes some balls, and it takes some kind of like, okay, this is what's happening around me, and this is how we're going to resolve it. Like we were running a river in Tanzania called the Ifakara, which runs into the Great Rukushi River, and we were attacked by hippopotamus, which personally I'd never experienced before. And we were on an open boat, like a local canoe and a local pirogue, and it's just like all three of us, the three guys in the boat, decided to do something totally different. One person decided to jump overboard and swim for it. The other person decided to start battering the hippo with his paddle. And I was kind of like torn between those two. And I decided, okay, the guy in the water looks better off, so I jumped as well. And then the hippo, once we were in the water, let go of the boat and started going for the guys in the water. And then became decision number 2: should I stay with the guy who's in the water with me, or should we part ways and swim to the different banks? And luckily, we ended up doing that. And he chased my mate rather than myself. But that's the kind of stuff that we're making life and death decisions at the spur of the moment, and you can't hesitate. You have to make a decision and go with it. And that's being in a totally unfamiliar environment is where it's at. When it comes to adventure and to hopefully survive that kind of situation and then learn from that and kind of like, next time we won't come so close to hippo, or we'll give them a wide berth, or we'll portage around this pot of hippo instead, and all that kind of stuff. And that's just one scenario where basically we're certainly in the deep end of the water and deep end of the pool, and having to learn to swim very quickly.
That's it. It's funny, when I set my business up, my last business up, what was that? 18 years ago now. I quickly became aware that there was lots and lots of people who were very highly technically qualified in different things, be it mountaineering, canoeing, kayaking, whatever it may well be. But also that actually what I really needed people to do was not only have that technical qualification, ability, decision-making, problem-solving, but I became aware that most of the cock-ups on expeditions and explorations happen at the airport in negotiating with the taxi drivers, or being able to cook a decent meal for a group of people on 2 MSR stoves in some weird remote location with bizarre ingredients, or so on and so forth. And actually,
that's it.
Because you're probably only mountaineering or paddling for a third of the day, maybe. If you've got customers with you, and then you spend 2/3 of the day doing other stuff. And that other stuff's where most of the accidents happen, and probably where you need to be as good as you are on the hill, on the cliff, on the water, or wherever else.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, absolutely. It's the expecting the unexpected, and the unexpected doesn't happen in the stuff that you've been doing for years. You kind of have a plan for that. But like you say, arriving in a country and missing taxis, or people getting split up because they're in different taxis, or the accommodation being shut down or burned down, or a bridge collapsing, or all these unknown variables and unaccountable for variables. That's what you need to be prepared for. And once again, having traveled a lot before you get into the leadership role, you would have encountered a similar type of event, similar type of scenario before, and or you learn better still that the best way to resolve these things is to chill out, to kind of like put a logical hat on, and rather than pressing the panic button, and just to kind of okay, this is what's happening at the moment, and making a plan around it, and being positive and being kind of like using your past experience to kind of resolve that problem.
Yeah. I was guiding in northern Canada quite a few years ago, a canoe expedition on a very remote, unknown river. It's a river system, which is rivers and lakes combined together. And the wind got very, very, very hectic, and it was starting to get way beyond what the clients could cope with. So I got everybody off and found a location for us to get off and hide from the wind for a while. And we decided then we put the tents up because, it was sort of 3:30, 4 p.m. and it was getting towards the end of the day anyway. And next thing we know, we had a mini tornado came through just where we had the tents up, and it ripped every tent out of the ground and scattered it for about 1 kilometer around and tore pretty much every tent. And you don't learn how to deal with that shit on a course. Like, you learn how to deal with that by having been in weird situations in the past and having to make the best you can of weird circumstances and weird resources.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's called experience, and it's that, and I say the same thing for people who are doing our courses. There's nothing like that, like real life experience. You can't learn, the loneliness of being on an expedition for 2 months away from home, and being in a totally unfamiliar environment. You can't learn that in a textbook. You have to have experienced that. Stuff like taking poop behind a boulder. There's nothing written in any textbook I've ever learned about how to poop behind a boulder, but most of these expeditions there are no toilets, so basically that's what you need to do. And all these kind of small practical details and all these kind of things that you need to have experienced, and there's nothing written in any book about how to do that. There's no manual for these kind of things. So yeah, you're right. It's that, and that's why experience is so important to once you're in a leadership role to be able to kind of help people through these kind of things, like being on an expedition for a long time, being away from family for a long time. You're having been there and done it yourself. It allows you a greater scope to help people through that, to empathize and to deal, understand people's reactions to that. And that's once again, that's experience, and that's having been there and done that yourself, and being empathetic and understanding towards somebody who's there for the first time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've spoken a lot about the past and some about the present, but tell me, what do you want the future of 360 expeditions to be? How will we recognize 360 expeditions maybe slightly differently in 10 years' time or something?
I'd like to, keep on going how we're going, for one thing, for sure. It's just like we're realizing a lot of people's dreams. It's not just people wanting to climb, the familiar mountains. And even so, it's also that. It's also, climbing the Kilimanjaros in the world. For a lot of people, that's the first time they're doing that, the first time in Africa, first time wearing boots, first time in a tent, first time, a lot of first. And so that's a strong element I want to keep promoting. But once having done that, and once they've got the taste for that, for my clients to understand that it's not as much about ticking boxes as it's about the experience, and it's about like being in a country and traveling and meeting people and coming back saying, wow, I had a great time in Nepal. Wow, I had a great time in Pakistan. I had a great time in South Africa. And being more important than the actual tick in the box at the end. And for myself, my own vision for 360 is to become an extreme environment specialist, where we offer, maybe we already do, but to continue this and to develop this notion of that no dream is too far fetched. And so in the past, we've had people coming asking us to run bespoke trips to some pretty far out objectives, like say the highest mountains in Greenland, unclimbed peaks in Mongolia, unpaddled rivers in the Amazon, crossing the Sahara Desert, all these kind of things, that are not commonly found on websites as promoted itineraries, but somebody might be there saying, you know what, I read this National Geographic from the 50s, and some guys were crossing the Sahara Desert by camel, and I really want to do that, and for us to be in a position to say, you know what, we can make it happen for you. And that's my own vision for 360. And of course, behind the scenes, to continue the running the familiar itineraries and that. But for my own focus will be to run adventures to places that people are not familiar with, and to touch on the rawness and the realness of the word adventure.
Yeah, in all of its ugliness and beauty at exactly the same time.
That's it. It's raw and real, and that's where you need that's where the satisfaction comes from of like, wow, I did something that felt really significant, and it's cliched, but was life changing, and so that's the important thing. It adds a huge affirmation to life. It adds a huge satisfaction to life, and it provides you with the memories that are much more important to my mind. I prefer to take my last breath knowing that, wow, I had some great done, rather than think I've got $1 million in the bank, So it's different stroke for different folks, but for myself, I'd like to be pushing that field where we're running expeditions to the far out and the unknown, and pulling them off successfully and based on our resources. At the moment, I think we can probably run expeditions to some pretty interesting and pretty remote objectives in probably like 80 or 90 countries in the world, where we have contacts, where we have the good people in place who can make the magic happen. And that's something I really want to pursue.
It's funny, isn't it, that my biggest frustration in running Elements, which was my previous business, was I almost couldn't find a way to communicate to people that the experience is far more satisfying than the summit or the completing the river or whatever it may well be. And I haven't quite worked it out. But for anybody listening to this, going to have the real adventure in the experience will last with you with a much bigger smile on your face and and happiness in your heart than just saying, I summited Everest, which is great, but the longer experience of we went and tried to do something in the Karakoram and it didn't quite work, but holy smoke, that was incredible, will probably be the thing that you'll remember when you're 90 years old and talking to your great-grandchildren.
Yeah, I think that's because it'll have a lot more personal significance, because if you're you can't escape the eyes of the world when you're climbing a well-known peak like Everest. But if you're going to the Karakoram and climbing a big mountain in the Karakoram, as an example, you're doing it solely for yourself. You're doing it only for yourself, primarily because nobody knows where that thing is. So it's basically that kind of thing of like, okay, I'm tackling adventure in its most rawest and real form, not just for anybody else, but except to satisfy my own curiosity and I'm doing this thing for myself, and that's where you find a much more significant and a much more meaningful experience. That's, to my mind, a lot more memorable.
Awesome. So, Rolfe, this brings us to the end of our time together today. I just wonder if people want to come and follow you, hang out with you, engage with 360, or just go and look at all the incredible images you've got floating around online. What's the best way of them doing that, please?
I'm continuously updating my social media. I can be found on Rolfe Oostra, Mountaineer at 360. Just type in my name on Facebook, for example, you'll find me. And we're continuously updating our profiles and continuously dating our adventures and images and videos that our clients and myself and our team, our guide team, are taking. And that's probably the best way forward to engage and to find some inspiration and to hear the latest news.
Fantastic. So, folks, if you've got an adventure that you want to go do, and you're not too sure who to go do it with, I think you've just met the man. So contact Rolfe, whether it involves cold stuff, high stuff, wet stuff, just adventurous stuff. He's the guy who can make it happen for you. Rolfe, I look forward to our next conversation because I'm just looking at our bullet points we spoke about, and we've only covered like 2/3 of them. So
I was just thinking the same.
And frankly, I can't wait to meet you in person and go and have a beer in a bar after we've had a day in the hills together.
I'm looking forward to the same, Rob, and it's going to be a special day when it happens, and it'd be great for when our paths finally cross. But yeah, it's in the meantime, you're doing a great job with what you're doing, and certainly your podcast is inspiring a lot of people, and to think that there is a light at the tunnel at the end of COVID, and focus on that and focus on the positive of your dreams, and you guys are making it happen, and by continuously doing what you're doing, and it's perfect. And like you say, I'm looking forward to the day when finally we get to kind of shake hands and have a beer.
Oh, especially the beer part. I really like beer. Awesome. Rolfe, stay safe, keep on being incredible, and I look forward to the next time. Thank you very much.
Me too, Rob, and I'm looking forward to the podcast number 3.
Yeah, let's do it.